I meticulously cared for Zhou Yuan, paralyzed, for 2 years. Everyone believed that the first thing he would do when he stood up would be to marry me. Only I, on the night of his successful surgery, asked, "Do you still want to marry me?" He hesitated. That simple answer he ultimately couldn't bring himself to say. I laughed softly. I understand. I took off the ring and left the place I had lived for 2 years without hesitation that very night. 1. Do you still want to marry me? Zhou Yuan was slightly stunned upon hearing this. He looked at his legs for a long time without speaking. The sounds of the outside bustle flowed in through the unclosed door. The doctor said Zhou is doing great after the surgery, and he'll be back to normal in less than half a month. I really didn't think Zhou would recover. 2 years ago, he almost gave up on himself. It's all thanks to his sweetheart's unwavering support. They're definitely getting married, right? We should prepare a wedding gift as soon as possible. Zhou Yuan heard these celebratory blessings, but in the end, he still didn't say anything. An awkward atmosphere filled the air. Finally, I got up and massaged his knees and calves as I always did. Considerately, I gave him a way out. Is this pressure okay? This broke the awkward atmosphere. His tense body gradually relaxed, and as I had done for the past 2 years, I asked softly, "Is anything uncomfortable?" He shook his head and answered seriously, "No, your massage is better than the caregiver's." I stared blankly at my hands as they kneaded his legs. In fact, in the beginning, I didn't know how to massage. He couldn't stand the caregiver touching his body. Whenever a caregiver arrived, he would get angry and kick them out. But massage was essential for his legs, so I followed the owner of a massage parlor and studied for 3 months. From soaking my own body in medicinal water for practice to finally touching his legs carefully. The first time, I only dared to massage him lightly when he was asleep. He was a light sleeper and still noticed. He lost his temper. "Get out." I didn't get out. Following the acupoints the massage parlor owner had taught me, I massaged him again. His legs were immobile, and he threw a pillow at my head. I didn't budge. He simply threw everything he could reach at me. Finally, it was a photo frame, containing a picture of him from university. He held a trophy in one hand and clenched his fist in the other, full of spirit. As warm blood flowed down the side of my forehead, he looked at me, wanting to struggle to get to my side, but the limitations of his legs left him helpless. Finally, he covered his face and suddenly cried out. "Leave, just leave, don't stay by my side. It's useless. I can't feel anything. No matter how much you massage, it's useless." 2. At that time, he gave up on himself, and I braved wind and rain to come every day to massage him. Until his mother found him swallowing sleeping pills and rushed him to the hospital. His mother couldn't do anything with him. I squatted in front of him and said, "Look at me." He obediently looked at me. I said, "Everything will be all right. Trust me." At that time, I didn't even know where my confidence came from. From that day on, I moved into his house. Zhou Yuan's mother cried and thanked me again and again, saying how fortunate they were to have me. She hesitated, and I knew what she wanted to ask. So I said, "If Zhou Yuan doesn't chase me away, I'll stay by his side." But the truth was, even if he chased me away, I wouldn't leave. When another massage proved useless, he lost his temper. "Get out, all of you get out." By then, he was already in a wheelchair, and the entire bedroom was a mess. But the good thing was, he finally avoided me and stopped throwing things at me. After he vented, I moved closer to him and said again, "Zhou Yuan, trust me." I repeated this sentence for 2 years. Gradually, his legs could feel pressure, and then gradually he could do some simple activities. Until yesterday's surgery, the doctor was incredulous, saying the surgery was a great success. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, he would be able to stand up. 3. Zhou Yuan's mother, upon hearing this news, shoved a bank card into my hand. I stared blankly at the bank card. These 2 years, I wasn't doing it for a bank card. Zhou Yuan's friends all called me sister-in-law, but only I knew the truth, I wasn't worthy of being called that. We hadn't even confessed our feelings to each other, let alone established a relationship. But fortunately, I had Zhou Yuan's promise, "Sophie, as soon as my legs recover, we'll get married." That was during his first treatment when the doctor delicately expressed their regret. I pushed him home. He broke down as soon as he entered the door. The once proud star had suddenly fallen from grace. It was something no one could accept. I hugged him tightly, and he bit my shoulder. He bit so deeply and fiercely that my shoulder still bore the tooth marks. When he saw the bloodstains, he came to his senses and said to me in a panic, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." After apologizing, I massaged his calves as usual, and he said those words. "No," he also asked, "Sophie, are you secretly in love with me?" I didn't deny it. I looked at him and said, "Yes." He looked at me for a long time before saying he would marry me, but I did so much not for an exchange of value. I just wanted him to feel the same way I did, hoping that one day he could fall in love with me too. At this moment, I got up as usual, poured massage oil into my palm, rubbed it to warm it, and then touched his calf. I knew he was watching me. After a long time, his voice came from above. Sophie, you don't have to do these things anymore. My hand paused, but I still insisted on finishing the massage. I looked up and asked him, one more time, desperately, Zhou Yuan, do you still want to marry me? He wanted to say something, but still kept his mouth shut. I could only laugh at my own wishful thinking. But the ring on my ring finger was one he had personally placed there. I had been secretly in love with him for so many years, how could I not be wishful? 4. I got up and washed the massage oil off my hands. The ring on my ring finger made my heart ache. He spoke from outside the door. Sophie, you're like a little sister to me. Tears splashed into the water, and I quickly wiped them away. Don't say things like that. Those words were too cruel to me. When I pushed open the bathroom door, the living room was still noisy. I lowered my head, looked into Zhou Yuan's eyes, and struggled to take off the ring. Actually, the ring size was wrong, a little too small. I didn't know if he was careless or if it wasn't meant for me in the first place. But I knew that it was too small, and forcing it on had made my finger ache. But in the past, I could still fool myself into thinking that's how all rings were. When I finally took it off, my finger felt relieved. I even regretted not taking it off sooner. Zhou Yuan's eyes darted around. I handed the ring to him. Here. The mark on my finger was clear. I added, it's a little too small. He wanted to say something, but I waved my hand. I pushed him out the door. 5. As soon as we went out, his friends in the living room practically swarmed us. What are you lovebirds whispering about that we can't hear? Don't worry, we won't make a fuss today. We'll make a fuss at your wedding. Let's hang out for a bit longer before we leave. Zhou Yuan's friends, like him, were polite and considerate. Because Zhou Yuan had just had surgery, everyone brought juice and light food. Someone asked Zhou Yuan, Zhou, once you're better, we'll go to Mount Titlis to ski again. Zhou Yuan casually agreed, no longer reacting nervously at the mention of skiing or basketball. His friend turned to me and said, sister-in-law, you should come too. Zhou will book your ticket. You'll definitely love it. Zhou Yuan looked up at me, throwing the question to me. Having been rejected twice in a row, even if I was shameless, I still had my pride. I said, you guys go. But Zhou Yuan suddenly spoke. It's fine to go together. Anyway, I think of you as my little sister. As soon as these words fell, everyone fell silent. His friend laughed and smacked his head. Zhou Yuan, what are you talking about? Immediately, more friends jumped in to smooth things over. His leg is just getting better, his head isn't clear. Sister-in-law, don't hold it against him. This sentence was turned over amid laughter and playfulness, but Zhou Yuan didn't say a word from beginning to end. 6. I remembered a long time ago, when my best friend saw the ring on my ring finger and asked me, Sophie, are you sure? They're not from the same world as us. If his leg recovers, will he really marry you? At that time, I didn't dare to say the answer. Even now, I still don't dare. Now I know Zhou Yuan has given me the answer. No. The atmosphere of the gathering was harmonious. Soft music played, and everyone talked about past events. I lowered my head and searched for Mount Titlis. It had low visibility and was a famous local ski resort. I couldn't understand a word they were saying. It was at this moment that I vaguely understood my friend's phrase, not from the same world. I stood up, and Zhou Yuan's gaze immediately fell on me. I went back to my bedroom. It was said to be my bedroom, but Zhou Yuan's mother had added everything. I made a call to the woman who had cried and thanked me 2 years ago. I rubbed my fingertips and asked, Auntie, that bank card of yours? She seemed to be itching for me to bring it up. Before I could finish, she immediately replied, 6 zeros. You can take it all. Thank you for taking care of Zhou Yuan these past 2 years. I gave a heavy sound. There was nothing to pack. I threw the only few pieces of clothing I had into the trash can. I took the card and went out the door. Passing by the living room, Zhou Yuan's friend asked me, Sister-in-law, what are you doing so late? I didn't want to embarrass Zhou Yuan. I smiled and said, I'm hungry. I'm going out to have a bowl of wontons. They offered to order takeout, but I refused. It's not worth it to order a few $100s worth of takeout. Zhou Yuan realized something and looked at me, his eyes unblinking. I waved to the people inside. I'm leaving now. At 1 in the morning, I left the place where I had lived for 2 years with a bank card in hand. I suppose it wasn't a complete loss. 7. I found myself a place to stay. No need to constantly watch over Zhou Yuan, no need to fear his sudden mental breakdowns at night. My body suddenly relaxed, and I wasn't used to it. Instead, I couldn't sleep. I held a glass of water on the balcony, looking at the few stars in the sky. Everything was silent, and I began to listen to my own voice. I thought I would be sad, would be heartbroken. But no, I only touched the red mark on my ring finger, wondering when it would fade. That night, I only felt that the wind was a little cool and the stars in the sky were a little bright. Zhou Yuan called early the next morning. I answered, but there was no sound from his end. Finally, I spoke. Is something wrong? Only then did he say hesitantly, Sophie, I want to eat custard buns for breakfast. After becoming paralyzed, he refused to eat. I tried one thing after another, but he kept his mouth shut, refusing to take a bite. Finally, my tears fell to the ground, and I pleaded, just take a bite. You can't go without eating. Perhaps annoyed by my crying, he finally frowned and bit into a custard bun. He didn't like the ones outside, so I learned how to make them. But everything from yesterday was still vivid in my mind. I still remembered his silence. I said frankly, Zhou Yuan, I've left. 8. The other end of the phone was silent for a long time. I didn't know what to say, so I simply hung up. There was a shocking amount of money left on the bank card. I was stunned counting those zeros. After counting them several times, I still couldn't believe it. I carefully kept the bank card, and then I understood my best friend's phrase, you're not from the same world. Indeed, my parents were just ordinary people. They knew I was taking care of my paralyzed boyfriend and had come to visit me. At that time, Zhou Yuan's mother had warmly welcomed them. They were at a loss, and when they returned home, they said to me, darling, this is a bit difficult. But they didn't stop me, only waved their hands and said, it's okay, just try it out. We can always come home. It was 2 years later, now, that I vaguely understood Zhou Yuan's mother's actions. Even Zhou Yuan was surprised by those plates of expensive dishes, let alone 2 ordinary people from a small town. Zhou Yuan's mother's warm hospitality was actually a clear message to my parents. We were not from the same world. I took that card and simply bought a new house. Not a single zero was reduced. Next, I was busy with renovations, busy with this and that. When I saw Zhou Yuan again half a month later, it was at the coffee shop at the entrance of the neighborhood. He was being pushed by his friends, who were cheering him on. Zhou, if you don't win Sophie back, I'll look down on you. Apologize to your sweetheart. Who else could be your sweetheart besides her? I only acknowledge her. 9. Zhou Yuan hadn't been out for 2 years. His skin was pale, and his face was blindingly white in the sunlight. Hearing his friend's half-forceful, half-joking teasing, he curled his lips perfunctorily. Let's talk about it when Sophie appears in front of me now. Unfortunately, I was at the table behind them. Hearing this, I subconsciously dodged to the side, but the next second, a friend coming out of the coffee shop cheerfully called my name. Sophie. She ran over to share with me. They have your favorite cake today. Zhou Yuan and his group of friends suddenly fell silent, watching them follow my friend's figure to see me. Friends put the cake in front of me, their faces changing, asking doubtfully, what's wrong? Because of my expression, they became instinctively nervous. Then I realized that it was just a bunch of them making a fuss. Why should I let them affect my mood? I changed my expression. It's nothing. Sit down. You still remember that I like this cake. With just this sentence, the floodgates opened. Too close, the voices from Zhou Yuan's table inevitably carried over. It's fate. Zhou Yuan, go apologize. Such a good girlfriend. I don't believe you can find a second one. I'm telling you, if you don't make it clear, we're not friends anymore. I was familiar with every voice. When Zhou Yuan was paralyzed in bed, they each came to see him. Among them was a girl who had a crush on Zhou Yuan. When she went in to see Zhou Yuan deliberately spilled water on her skirt. The weather was hot, and the skirt was thin. Once wet, her skin was immediately visible. The girl stood awkwardly in place. I found a shawl and handed it to her. Zhou Yuan's eyes were cold as he looked at her and sneered. You still like me even like this? The girl's eyes were red. I gently closed the door. When she came out, she raised her head proudly and said to me, I don't want to like Zhou Yuan anymore. He's not worth it. After saying that, she left, carrying her wet skirt. Halfway there, she returned. She watched me clean up the water stains dripping from her skirt. Awkwardly, she said, but you're very nice, thank you. Don't like Zhou Yuan either. He doesn't deserve you. After saying that, she ran away quickly. Later, we became friends. We would exchange gifts during holidays. The people around Zhou Yuan were not bad. While thinking this distractedly, I listened to my friend's words. It was when Zhou Yuan's voice sounded that I realized he was standing next to me. He called my name, Sophie. I subconsciously looked up. He frowned. After seeing me, he seemed unable to say what he wanted to say. His friends behind him were all cheering him on. Zhou Yuan, apologize and win back your sweetheart. Hearing this, Zhou Yuan frowned even more. But now I didn't need his apology. Romance was originally a matter of mutual consent. What's more, hadn't I taken the bank card? I still hadn't counted the zeros behind the numbers. One can't have it both ways. Zhou Yuan stood blankly in front of me. I looked at his conflicted expression and spoke. It's not necessary. I don't need an apology. Hearing this, he breathed a sigh of relief. He turned halfway, then looked back at me and asked, when are you coming back? Perhaps I hadn't made it clear last time, so this time I explained it more clearly. I'm not going back. Zhou Yuan didn't know what he was thinking. He looked at me deeply, then finally said, okay, softly. He turned and returned to his table. Those familiar friends were all watching the spectacle. How is it? Did you win her back? When are you getting married? When can I hand out wedding candies? We're not getting married. Zhou Yuan's voice was clear and a little impatient. The table suddenly went silent. Zhou Yuan repeated, his voice unconsciously raised. Why do you all think I would marry her? Just because I'm grateful to her, I have to marry her? I told you, I see her as a little sister. That was the third time. One shouldn't push one's luck. I simply stood up and said to his friends, you've all misunderstood the marriage thing. I just took the money to take care of Zhou Yuan. Zhou Yuan looked up and stared at me deeply. I met his gaze frankly. I looked at his furrowed brow and said, you don't have to treat me like a little sister either. A stranger is fine. 10. During the time I was taking care of Zhou Yuan, sometimes I couldn't help but wonder if Will hadn't been in a car accident, would he have fallen in love with Clark? At first, I thought he would. Later, I thought he wouldn't. I struggled back and forth between would and wouldn't, but in the end, there was no answer to the question. I didn't know their answer, but I knew the answer between Zhou Yuan and me. Zhou Yuan was in love, publicly and flamboyantly. He announced it on his social media and openly introduced his girlfriend to his friends, making it difficult for me not to know. I ran into Zhou Yuan and his girlfriend at a gathering. There were too many mutual friends. No one expected to meet. When Zhou Yuan let his girlfriend in, my friend squeezed my hand. After all, they had seen how I had taken care of Zhou Yuan for those 2 years. I smiled at her reassuringly and looked openly at the girl Zhou Yuan had brought in. There was nothing special about her. 2 eyes, 1 mouth. Zhou Yuan also saw me and randomly chose a corner seat near the door. Only when he sat down did he ask the waiter for a fruit platter. When the fruit platter arrived, he placed it in front of the girl. The girl smiled, her eyes curving, and leaned over to whisper something in his ear. The girl shared it with him happily, but he wasn't even willing to lower his head. His gaze was on the fruit platter as he listened lazily to the girl's words. Outsiders could see the obvious lack of attention. If this was how he was when he was in love, then it was quite boring. I wasn't provoked, but my friend was. She drank too much and pulled at me, saying she wanted to introduce me to a boyfriend. I patiently explained that she was drunk. When I helped her out the door, Zhou Yuan's girlfriend made eye contact with me. Sister, I recognize you. My footsteps stopped. She continued, thank you for taking care of Zhou Yuan. I nodded and wanted to leave, helping my friend. The girl was eager to outshine me. Noticing the sudden silence around her, she hurriedly got up and stood in front of me. But if I had been by Zhou Yuan's side at that time, I could have done it too. Those random tempers that had to be endured at any time, the water glasses that were thrown around, and the inability to sleep deeply. She said she could have done it too? I chuckled softly. Anyone could say those words, but there was no such thing as if. But maybe not. What if Zhou Yuan's leg had problems again? She could try to take care of him. Zhou Yuan's expression had already changed early on. My friend stepped forward to ease the atmosphere. I also joked to ease the tension. When that time comes, why not just spend some money and hire a caregiver? With just this sentence, Zhou Yuan still got angry. Bang! The glass hit the table heavily. I turned to look. He frowned and said impatiently, why bring up something that's already in the past? It's boring. But why couldn't something in the past be brought up? It was that he didn't want it mentioned, he thought it was humiliating. 11. When my friend woke up the next day and heard about this, she couldn't stop scolding. What does she mean, flaunting in your face? Let her flaunt if she wants to flaunt. I counted the zeros in my bank account balance. I wasn't even angry. It was at this moment that I realized how powerful money was. But my friend thought I was just putting on a brave face and mentioned again, Zhou Yuan is already in love. Do you want me to help you find a boyfriend? With your conditions, it would be easy to find one. Everyone was used to fast-paced relationships now, but I still wanted to slow down, to meet someone and get to know them slowly, to exchange true feelings for true feelings. I refused politely. No, thanks. Because of my refusal, my friend firmly believed that I was heartbroken by Zhou Yuan and still waiting for him. She scolded Zhou Yuan from the side, and I smiled and cursed along with her. The days passed slowly. I learned baking and flower arranging. During this time, there were many people who came to show their affection, but when I suggested that we get to know each other slowly, they retreated as if facing a formidable enemy. Then, less than half a month later, I would see the news that they had found a girlfriend. My friend laughed at me for being a professional matchmaker. I also laughed. I really wasn't in a hurry. When I was taking care of Zhou Yuan, I was wholeheartedly devoted to him. Now I wanted to focus on myself first. I wanted to empty my heart and then accept other people. I wanted to accept someone in the future who was as sincere as I was. I was still looking forward to true feelings meeting true feelings. 12. Zhou Yuan broke up and started dating again in less than a week. Once again, he announced it grandly. My friends gradually accepted the fact that there was no possibility between me and Zhou Yuan. Like Clark, I learned to scuba dive, carrying my equipment every day to find fun sea areas. I wasn't in a city for half a year, but news of Zhou Yuan intentionally reached my ears. He had broken up again. Perhaps he had woken up. Suddenly, he stopped. Zhou Yuan's friends hinted to me in a joking way that Zhou Yuan was now single, urging me to come back. As the new year approached, I had to go home. But I didn't expect that everyone would be waiting for me as soon as I got off the plane. Zhou Yuan's friends all came, teasing me, "Sister Sophie, you're a shade darker." They didn't distance themselves from me because Zhou Yuan and I weren't together. One friend even sent me a message on the day I made things clear with Zhou Yuan. "Sister Sophie, even without Zhou Yuan, I'd like to be friends with you." But I didn't expect that Zhou Yuan would come too. He stood far away, looking dazed. But in the end, he still took a step forward and said to me, "Long time no see." Half a year ago, his attitude towards me still contained a hint of resentment. Now, he actually said, "Long time no see," to me like a friend. I also replied politely, "Long time no see." He said cautiously, "My leg." He was interrupted by my ringtone halfway through. I smiled at them apologetically. I answered the phone. As soon as I answered, a young man's voice was bright. "Sister, where are you?" I was also infected by his voice. "I'll send you a location. Don't worry, come over slowly." After hanging up, my friends surrounded me, saying they had decided on a location for dinner. After they finished speaking, I asked, "Is it okay to add one more person?" They were all surprised. "Add who? Add what kind of person?" The orange windbreaker was brightly dazzling. I told him to go slowly, but he still ran all the way to my side. He directly took my hand and said clingingly, "I missed you so much." His actions were too fast. My friends didn't have time to react. I wanted to take the suitcase from his hand, but he refused. Only then did I introduce him to my friends. Ethan, my boyfriend. 13. Sometimes, fate is so strange. It comes suddenly at a time you can't imagine. Ethan confessed to me. I said, as usual, "Let's take it slow." Actually, I was prepared for him to retreat after 2 weeks, but I didn't expect him to persist for so long. When I came back to my senses, his figure was everywhere around me. I wasn't young anymore this year. People around me would think I was stringing them along when I said let's take it slow. But young people didn't. When he heard let's take it slow, he really took it slow. Sincere and passionate. "You hit it well enough. If it weren't for this time coming back, we probably wouldn't have seen him. No way, you're treating this time." It wasn't that I hit it well enough, it was that I didn't expect him to come back with me. I missed my flight because of traffic. When I rebooked the next flight, he sent a message pitifully, "Why haven't you come yet? I hate you." Only then did I know that he had bought the seat next to me to give me a surprise, but we missed each other by mistake. He landed early and waited at the airport. We had just reunited. My friends were still cheering, and I smiled and raised my hand. I'll treat. Ethan copied my actions, raised his hand, and copied my tone of voice. I'll treat. He was outgoing and quickly became familiar with my friends. When we arrived at the restaurant, there were just enough seats, even with Ethan joining. Only then did someone realize that Zhou Yuan hadn't come. They called him. Zhou Yuan's voice was unclear. My leg suddenly feels uncomfortable. I'm going to the hospital. In this situation, how could they sit still? So suddenly? Is everything okay? What did the doctor say? It's okay. The doctor said I just need to rest. You guys eat first. I'll treat you back next time. Although Zhou Yuan said this, the previous incident was too serious, and his family background was there. Looking at their troubled faces, I took the initiative to give them a way out. You guys go check on Zhou Yuan. We can eat this meal anytime. Ethan and I are tired anyway. We want to go back and rest. Ethan wasn't angry about the sudden change either. He cheerfully sent people away. I took Ethan home. On the way, he excitedly pointed to the flowers and plants by the roadside, asking this and that. He had endless things to say every day. He could even talk to the dogs by the roadside for a while. When we got home, no one expected the person who was supposed to be in the hospital to be standing at my door. Ethan's hand, holding mine, paused. When he saw Zhou Yuan step forward, he spoke first. Zhou Yuan, is it? His voice contained a smile, and he looked particularly amiable, even calling him brother. I instinctively glanced at him. Zhou Yuan smiled at him but didn't answer his words. He looked at me and called me, Sophie. 14. His gaze fell on me. Long time no see. He said it again. Ethan didn't show any unhappiness at being ignored. He held my hand obediently and stood to the side. Zhou Yuan wanted to say something, but I stepped forward and interrupted him, actively introducing Ethan to him. This is my boyfriend, Ethan. Hearing this, Zhou Yuan forced a smile. After a long silence, he said, softly. After he said that, he added, there might be something wrong with my leg. Ethan spoke up appropriately, anxiously concerned. If there's something wrong with your leg, you should go to the hospital quickly. He patiently inquired, do you need me to call an ambulance for you? After taking out his phone, he explained in a serious manner, after all, my girlfriend isn't a doctor. Zhou Yuan ignored him and called out to me again, Sophie? Ethan also ignored him, looked at me directly, and asked, sister, why is he ignoring me? How would I know why Zhou Yuan was ignoring him? Zhou Yuan called out to me again, Sophie? Ethan didn't let go of me, brought his face close to mine, and asked, sister, why? I pushed his head away. I don't know. He brought his face over again. I couldn't always resist him. I subconsciously took out the door key to open the door, and only when I was standing in front of the door did I suddenly realize that Zhou Yuan was still standing next to me. Ethan made no secret of it. Sister, you forgot that brother Zhou Yuan is still at the door. The expression on Zhou Yuan's face almost couldn't be maintained. Seeing my gaze fall on him, he finally spoke. Talk? Ethan shook my hand. Sister, what do you want to say to him? It was at this moment that I realized his green tea attitude, which was completely different from the beginning. Slowly, I followed what he said, I don't want to say anything to him. After saying that, I closed the door. Ethan hugged me as soon as he entered the room. I'm jealous. I touched his head. What are you jealous of? When I started dating him, I told him everything, without reservation. He knew my past with Zhou Yuan, so what was there to worry about? I hate that you're a block of wood. I didn't know how to answer, but before I could answer, he perked up again. It's good to be a block of wood. He said in a muffled voice, you can't see when other people are showing you affection. But Zhou Yuan still called that night. Sophie, do you know that your boyfriend has a 4-year-old first love? 15. Zhou Yuan was really hospitalized, the situation was unknown. The former girlfriends who had said they would take care of him went to the hospital one after another. The friends around me even bet on how many days they could last at most. The result was 2 days. Most of them left the hospital after a few hours. My friend said he deserved it, repeatedly telling me not to be soft-hearted. Of course, I wouldn't be soft-hearted. Ever since I took that card, I hadn't thought about looking back. Zhou Yuan's mother suddenly sent a message one night. Sophie, can you meet with Zhou Yuan alone? Ethan was next to me when she sent the message to me. I seriously refused, I'm sorry, my boyfriend might mind. She called, begging bitterly. I beg you, I'll give you as much money as you want. Zhou Yuan can't stop eating. I beg you, just get him to eat. Why would something like this happen to Zhou Yuan? She was incoherent, her tone collapsing. From her words, I guessed that Zhou Yuan's hospitalization wasn't a minor issue. And Zhou cried out. Why would something like this happen to us? Please help me, he can't stop eating. Ethan sat obediently to the side, not wanting to make things difficult for me, and said generously, it's nothing to meet once. Don't worry about me. But it didn't matter anymore. Why did I have to meet this once, and as long as I met once, they would use this excuse to make me meet countless times. I still insisted to the collapsing woman, I'm sorry, I don't owe you anything. I have my life to live, and so does Zhou Yuan. The next day, I learned from my friends that there was a problem with Zhou Yuan's leg. The low-probability event that the doctor had mentioned had happened to him. After he stood up, his muscles atrophied, and he might have to return to his previous life. During that time, he couldn't stand me being with him. Not to mention experiencing the feeling of standing up again, now there was another problem, and he was told he might be paralyzed. I didn't reply to that message. Zhou Yuan suddenly called. I thought he was calling to ask about massage and medicinal oil. But no, he said, Sophie, do you believe that you and your little boyfriend won't last long? I didn't answer. He continued, wanna bet? He said, bet on your boyfriend's loyalty. I didn't know how to bet on loyalty. But I knew that as long as there was a desire to test it, trust would collapse immediately. I won't play such a boring bet with you. But he didn't care about my refusal. He said the last sentence, you just wait and see, men are all the same. I flipped that event over as an interlude. In the next few days, I was constantly busy because of the new year. Ethan wanted to wander around here with me and asked me out several times, but I didn't have time. He was dejected, his disappointment was written all over his face. Finally, realizing that I was really busy, he started wandering around the city alone. His personality never lacked friends, and I wasn't worried about him not making friends. Sure enough, in just 2 days, he was able to go out excitedly. He had already gone out before I left in the morning. Sometimes I was awake and happened to meet him, and sometimes I was still sleeping when I went to the living room and could only see the note he had left. As the notes increased, the unease came slowly and belatedly. What was he doing? Who was he meeting? I thought of how he pestered me when I was on a business trip for a week, asking what I was doing. For the first time, I understood his thoughts. I was too slow to warm up, and I was always a beat slow in noticing the other person's thoughts. I wanted to have a good chat with him. But before I had time to chat with him, Zhou Yuan sent a photo with a changed number. Ethan and a girl were laughing happily in a coffee shop. In an instant, unease welled up in my heart. He told me in the morning that he was meeting friends. Zhou Yuan sent a message, "See, men are all the same." I didn't know why he was sending these messages. He sent more and more photos. He said, "Guess, will he come home tonight?" I deleted and blocked him. 16. I sat at home, hesitatingly asking Ethan what he was doing. He replied quickly. "Eating with friends." I still didn't ask, "When are you coming back?" "Around 10 o'clock tonight." "Then I'll wait until 10 o'clock tonight." Time passed minute by minute. I waited anxiously on the sofa. At 11 o'clock, Ethan still hadn't returned, and he hadn't even sent a message. Zhou Yuan called me on a different phone. "How is it? Isn't it what I said, men are all the same?" But I didn't know what he was trying to do by doing this. Even if Ethan really betrayed me, so what? If he betrays me, then I'll break up with him and like the next one. It's that simple. I would never lose the courage to try because of being hurt. When the girl who used to like Zhou Yuan told me that Zhou Yuan didn't deserve me, I subconsciously doubted it. He was kind, good-hearted, and had countless advantages, how could he not deserve me? Now, I was looking back from an objective perspective at the 2 years I had taken care of him. He was bad-tempered, gave up on himself, and had the most advanced medical equipment but was unwilling to try. Now, he even wanted to drag me down with him. He really didn't deserve me. I waited at home until 1 in the morning. Ethan still hadn't returned. But why was I waiting? Why did I have to believe Zhou Yuan's words instead of asking myself, why should something between us be interfered with by Zhou Yuan? I put on my coat and pushed open the door. As I went downstairs, I happened to run into Ethan downstairs in the community. 17. He got out of the car. There was a girl sitting in the back seat, the one in the photo. He was suddenly a little at a loss when he saw me and called my name, explaining, "Sophie, I'm back a little late." The woman in the car also saw me and waved at me. The car was about to leave. I stopped the car before it could leave. The driver scolded me for not knowing the danger. I knocked on the car window. The woman showed a beautiful face and asked me, "What's wrong?" I asked her, "Are you Ethan's first love?" Hearing this, she explained in a panic, "You're Ethan's current girlfriend, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm just here on a business trip." I interrupted her. "Yes or no?" Realizing that I was angry, Ethan came over to explain anxiously, "There was a traffic jam on the road, so I was a little late coming back." He said 10 o'clock at night, and it was now 1 in the morning. Did the traffic jam last for several hours? I asked again, yes or no? Yes. During the time I was dating Ethan, he never told me about this first love. Some people might not mind, but I minded. I broke up with Ethan on the spot. The girl got out of the car in a panic and wanted to persuade me, following me, saying one sentence after another. "I didn't intend to disturb you. We just happened to run into each other. Ethan was also traveling here, so we had dinner together. I really didn't do anything. You can check the surveillance." She said more and more, but I wasn't moved. Finally, Ethan spoke, "Shut up." She stood there at a loss. Ethan stopped and said to her, "You go first." He watched the girl leave, then turned and chased after me, following me home, blocking the door and not letting me in. "We need to talk." I looked up at him. "It's not necessary." When I agreed to date him, I said that 2 people should be sincere with each other. I told him everything in detail, but he concealed the fact of his first love, and concealed having dinner with his first love. I wasn't a block of wood. I just chose to be a block of wood because I was with him. I didn't want to talk and laugh with others, and I didn't want to pick up on other people's topics and jokes. I chose not to see other people's shows of affection and treat them coldly. That's it, let's break up. 18. This relationship was announced quickly and ended quickly. My friend asked me to bring Ethan along to play. I said generously, we broke up. My friend sighed, and pulled at me to introduce me to a boyfriend. I still refused. I was still looking forward to a sincere person. If there wasn't one, then I'd rather be alone. Zhou Yuan's mother would still call me, begging me to go see Zhou Yuan. I still didn't agree. I sent her all the recipes and prescriptions and booked a plane ticket back to my hometown. This time I didn't miss the flight. Ethan was sitting next to me when I sat down in my seat. He smiled and said to me, "Sister, this time we didn't miss it." But he didn't even want to understand why I was angry, he just wanted to make up with me in every possible way. I was wrong, let's make up. Forgive me. Let's be good. He said these words over and over again. When he was pursuing me, I could analyze even a punctuation mark for a long time. Now, he wasn't even willing to explain properly. What's more, I had repeatedly refused Zhou Yuan's mother's request to see me just once. I really couldn't think of any reason why he had to meet with his first love. We're not making up, let's just leave it at that. After getting off the plane, he stood in place. When I took a taxi, I turned my head to look and he had indeed left. A sincere and passionate child, but fickle. But it didn't matter, at least I enjoyed his passion. I would still start the next relationship with anticipation. End.